Hello, and welcome to the Sound Up Seattle podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Seattle and Washington sports. I'm your host, Tyler Cartwright, joined as always by my co-host,
John Carey.
And we are here today with what is it's not our biggest letdown, but our bracket, as always, sucked after the first weekend. It doesn't matter what happens. We always pick a 2 seed, and it's always one that loses. But that is something that happened, and we will be talking about that, as well as the Mariners season. When you're hearing this, it's going to start today. So we're here to get excited, talk about what we think is going to happen a little bit this season, and just get a little hype going for this Mariners team. A lot of things happened over the last week to get excited about. John, anything to say before we get started?
No, sir. Let's get it on.
All right, here is some Coyote Picnic. All right, buddy. I think we finished with Mariners. I think the Mariners is the more fun discussion to be had. And so what I want to talk about is the bracket. And more specifically for us, the Gonzaga Bulldogs, how they fared in this tournament. So talk me through, how was your emotional roller coaster of a weekend with the Gonzaga Bulldogs?
It was good. So, anybody listening should be well aware that the Gonzaga Bulldog train has left the station. They had a good year, a fun year, but their season did come to an end against Houston. Running through those two games, we didn't get much of a chance to break down Gonzaga, Georgia, but ultimately I went into that game feeling very confident. Georgia finished 12th in the SEC, and I really believe in this Zag team just from a talent standpoint. And this one was just an absolute beatdown. It was funny comparing it to the St. Mary's game where we went 1 of 16 from 3. We hit 60% of our three-pointers in this game and just absolutely blitzed Georgia. The only thing they did at a high level was offensive rebound and generate some turnovers, but they were also just throwing the ball out of bounds every third possession, and we were hitting 60% of our threes, so we were up something like 23-4. And
I think it was 27-5 at one point.
Yeah, and it was just like, okay, this game is over. And then from there, they crawled back. I think the closest they ever cut it was like 16, but it was just us pulling away throughout the entire game. So dominant performance there, very low stress, a lot of fun. Shout out to Braden Huff, was really good in that game, 18 points. Nolan Hickman, we'll have more to say on him
perennial haters of Nolan Hickman we are.
Correct. He showed up again in a game where we didn't really need him to show up against a bad opponent, but he had 5 of his 6 threes, 18 points for him. And then Caleb Battle, who will have a lot to say in general, was phenomenal. 24 points, 8 rebounds, hit 4 of his 7 threes, was just everywhere, creating turnovers. He was awesome. We love Caleb. So, awesome game for him. Easy win in the first round. And that set us up, and it's tough, tough to be put as an 8 seed. I think this team deserved better than that. I would have loved to see him get a 6 or a 7 and get a chance to make it to the Sweet 16 without running into a 1 seed. But, if they want to do that, they should have won some of their close games early this season. And, they, you can always have a chance to beat one of these 1 seeds in the second round. So they ended up losing 81-76 to Houston. But it was an excellent game. Houston kind of jumped on us early and basically held a 9-point lead from halfway through the first half to the very end of the game. It was just 9 points basically the entire time. And then Gonzaga made a really late run, closed it to 3. We had the ball down 3 with less than a minute left and just couldn't execute down the stretch, and Houston pulled it away. You can't talk about this game without talking about LJ Cryer. Definitely going to be the LJ Cryer game when people think about this game historically. Just the awesome guard for Houston. He's definitely an NBA guy, even though he's a little undersized. He shoots the 3. I shouldn't say better than anybody but Steph, but maybe he's on that kind of Steph, Buddy Hield, like college 3, where it's just, okay, everyone knows what he's going to try to do. but he's just going to do it anyway. He was 6
He's
of
a guy
11.
you just have to have somebody on the perimeter at all times, kind of thing. Like you're basically 4v4, and he's just standing there being guarded.
Yeah,
whatever it is.
And that's not enough. Like, that's what you need to do, and he's still going to probably hit 4 threes on you. So he's that kind of talent, and he just devoured us. 6 of 11 from 3, hit all his free throws. He had 30 points against us, which really stings. But that's what we were worried about. You know, some of the size they have to guard and the shooting they had to guard against Hickman and Nembhard, we just couldn't handle him in particular. But then on our side, Graham Ike had one of his best games as a Zag. He was so awesome tonight, and really excited that he might come back. It feels like his senior year, and the fact that we might get another year of Graham is just like, we're just spoiled, because he can be so good, man. He had 2 of his 3 threes in this game, which is just absolutely found money. Like, every time he hit his first 2, and when he took his third, it's like, bro, do not take this shot. Like, I don't care if you make 10 straight, it's still a bad shot. But he finished with 27 points, hit all his free throws, had some big rebounds. He was awesome. Caleb Battle was really good again with 17 points. Man, I love him so much. He was crying after the loss. He was really upset. You know, he's wanted to be on this stage for so long, and to see him show up the way he did, you know, averaging 21 points in his 2 tournament appearances for the Zags, just, yeah, one of my favorite Zags in a long time. The fact that we only had him for 1 year makes me sad, because he's just a dude. I just am completely in love with his game and his mentality. Yeah. I also want to note that while Hickman went 5 of 6 of 3 against Georgia in a blowout win where we didn't really need him to hit any of his shots, he went 0 for 2 from 3, which equated to 0 of 2 from the field. He took 2 shots. They were both threes, and he missed them both. He finished the game with 0 points, 1 assist, and 1 rebound in 20 minutes.
He does shy away from those big moments there, that Hickman.
Fucking crawls under a goddamn rock. The second there's any sort of pressure, I get crap all the time from my friends for being like such a Nolan Hickman hater, but the best part of this loss by far is knowing that I will never have to see Nolan Hickman in a Gonzaga Bulldogs jersey ever again. I don't hate the guy, but I absolutely hate the game. Nolan, if you're ever in Seattle, I will buy you a beer. Like, I have nothing against that human being, but I do not want to see him suit up for my team again. So that's really the only good news.
Yeah. I think coming into this, we had exactly the right amount of hope for this team. Like, there was an outside shot, but we both knew that these guards could get picked on. I think we talked about it a couple weeks ago. Maybe Definitely. It was last week. Yeah, it was last week when we were talking about the games. But we both knew that these guards could get picked on pretty easily. Nembhard's just size-wise, he can't sustain it. You know, he's a guy who's just too small. Even if he makes it to the NBA level, it's just like he's not going to be a guy that doesn't get picked on. Like, he's kind of built for that in this era of basketball. Same thing with Hickman. Like, if he's going to be playing the 2, he's a pretty small 2. And he gives you guys some variety in terms of you can set your lineup to be a little smaller, run a little faster. What I was really surprised by was that Ajayi, who was such a big pickup from Pepperdine last season, you know, averaging I think 18 points a game for Pepperdine, like, he didn't really do much at all for you guys this entire season. You said it, we were really impressed with Braden Huff in that first game, and just really he turned it on. I thought he picked on those Georgia Bulldogs really well, and that allowed Ike to kind of get some rest and turn it on for that second game. But I was surprised at the lack of Ajayi in this kind of weekend, and I'm intrigued because he's got that NBA type body. He's got kind of the NBA readiness, but we will see. You know, this season didn't really prove much to NBA scouts. I think maybe there's a chance that he comes back. Maybe that's what Few was doing. You know, he knew Caleb was leaving. He was like, we got to have Ajayi for one more year. But the way that he was used was not conducive to like getting him the highest to his highest potential, I think.
Yeah.
In a guy who's really talented, so that's tough.
And you know, it's really, really tough for Mike. You know, I think it's fair to say Few didn't use him in the way to best show his talents, but it's also worth saying that his game might not be. It may look best just in like an empty do-it-yourself offense like Pepperdine ran, and you know, NBA isn't necessarily looking for that, but I think they want a guy that can succeed in the system. But yeah, there's no doubt that this season was horrible for Michael Ajayi's draft stock. People were talking about him being a late first or second round pick last year. He wanted to come back. He wanted to prove that he was like a lottery guy, which is why he came back. He's like, okay, I'm going to go to Gonzaga, going to do the Brandon Clark thing and, become a top 10 pick in the NBA. And yeah, after this year, I cannot imagine he wants. He's said that he's done playing college basketball. Even if he wanted to play another year, there's no way he'd come back to Gonzaga. This year really hurt his draft stock particularly. So sorry, Mike, but I think his game just wasn't a great fit for this team. A little surprised neither him nor Few recognized that before he decided to come here. But I digress.
I think that is something that they'll figure out. There's a world where he comes back to Gonzaga and Few was like, hey, this is going to be the Caliph season. He's a senior. We're going to let him kind of take over your role, and then you can step into that kind of 3 scoring guy in this next season. Is Nembhard coming back? I don't think he is, right?
No, Nembhard's out of eligibility. Yeah, I'll just do a quick rundown of who's in and who's out. But just one thing I did want to note is, I gave, and I know a lot of people have given Few a lot of flack this year for managing lineups and choices with who has and hasn't played and all that stuff. Particularly with Hickman, but all over the place. And he made 2 adjustments down the stretch, basically going into the WCC tournament, and particularly starting with the St. Mary's game. That really unlocked the best that we've seen of this team since, the Baylor game. And that was starting Braden Huff. Braden Huff has started every game since St. Mary's, and basically taking all of Dusty Stromer's minutes and giving them to Emmanuel Innocenti. Those 2 decisions have been huge for this team. Innocenti's defense and effort and rebounding and his surprisingly adequate 3-point shooting has been just a lot better than anything Dusty could give us at this stage in his career. And Huff, coming in the starting lineup, playing next to Ike, has looked like a totally different guy. And he's been a guy that, was up and down, and he'd put up big numbers against bad teams, but we never felt like, it was a little Hickman-esque of like, when it matters, where is Huff? He has been, a top 3 scorer on this team every single game the last 3 games, putting up 11 to 18 points a game. It's just been really, really big for the team. So I want to shout out Few for making those adjustments down the stretch. He does listen sometimes. But yeah, let's just talk about who's in and who's out. Nembhard, yeah, he's a super senior. He's gone. I do feel a little bad for him. It's like his brother, Ryan, obviously a better shooter than he is and taller. But like, people are always amazed at Andrew's passing in the NBA. They're like, oh, Andrew Nembhard's such a good passer. It's like, yeah, we knew he was a really good passer at Gonzaga, but like Ryan is just an even better passer. Like Ryan's just a truly like Chris Paul level, just handling the ball passer. But I think because of his size and his shooting, I don't think he'll really get a cup of water in the NBA. I think he'll be throwing entry passes to Drew Timme for the Long Island Nets in the G League. But
shout out to Drew Timme. He dropped 50, I think, the other day, is what I saw.
He'll be dropping 60 with Ryan there, I'll tell you what. Those 2 would be good together. Hickman's gone too. He's another super senior, so he's out. Caliph is gone. He is a super senior. He's out of eligibility.
Don't tell me your favorite guy's out. No. Don't tell me your favorite guy's gone.
I think
does he have one more year?
Is Ben Gregg a senior? I think Ben's a junior. I think we got one more year, Ben Gregg. I'm actually not 100% certain about that. Here, let me look at this real quick.
I've been waiting for you to drop that name, and I was going to, give a moment for you to cry it out if we needed to.
Oh, no, you know what? I think he is a senior. I think he is a senior. He might, with the COVID stuff, he might have another year of eligibility, but honestly, the Benaissance never really happened the way I thought it would. I love Ben, but I think part of the thing too is obviously Huff is coming back, and I believe Ike is coming back. All the signs are pointing that Ike is going to play another year with Gonzaga. So with those 2 and with our glut of size behind them, I want to see Ishmaela get more minutes. We have some freshmen coming in that I'd like to see get some time.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just time to clear up some space in the front court. So I think I'm working under the assumption Ben Gregg is gone. Dusty Stromer entered the transfer portal. I understand.
Not shocked.
Yeah, he just wasn't getting run. Jun Sakyo entered the transfer portal.
Our guy. We had such high hopes for him a couple years ago.
It always happens with these guys, man. So, not surprised at all, but I am sad to see him go. We never really got to see him in any real way at Gonzaga. But the guys we know are coming back are Ike, Huff, Emmanuel Innocenti will be back, Ishmaela will be back, and then we have a bunch of talented. Braden Smith redshirted this year out of Colgate, so he'll be very good. He'll step right into that Nemhard role. And then we've got some young players coming in. We're going to be aggressive in the transfer portal, I'm sure. I'd really love to get a more true 2 and a more true 3 to fill in for Khalif and Hickman. But I think our front court is going to be very, very good again.
Yeah. Is Steele Venters, is he finally going to have a knee, or is he done?
He is definitely eligible, and I think he's planning on staying with the program. I've decided to plan on Steele Venters not playing for the Gonzaga Bulldogs. I think I'll be very excited.
It's probably a fair assumption.
Yeah, it seems like that's not the way it's been going.
All right. We've been talking about the Zags for 15 minutes.
Yeah,
let's jump into a little bit more of the tournament discussion. So we wanted to have the tournament discussion because there's a little bit of something to be said about college basketball in general. In the Sweet 16, first of all, we got 9 of our 16 picks right. Our champion that we picked, obviously out in the second round to Arkansas and John Calipari. Little upsetting, but a team that shoots sub 30% from 3 was not necessarily had the highest hopes. We just kind of rode with the storyline there. But let's talk about this Sweet 16. So we were talking before the pod. There's 4 teams from the Big 10, 4 teams from the Big 12, 1 team from the ACC in the top seed in the tournament, Duke, and then 7 teams from the SEC. That's it. There's no school outside of those Power 4 conferences that made the Sweet 16. Just give me your thoughts on that. What that means for college basketball and the state of college basketball right now. Kind of surprising to me. So I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's a little overrated. I appreciate the fact that with NIL and everything, people are worried about. But if anything, NIL just spreads talent around. But maybe the argument is it spreads talent around, but also buoys talent up to the highest levels. But I do think, there were some really fun mid-major, runs in this tournament. We weren't getting the 14 seeds winning games, but guess what? It's not going to happen every year. It also leads to really compelling basketball in the next rounds. So I'm not losing any sleep over that. But yeah, Drake made it to the round of 32. They played Texas Tech tough. McNeese made it to the round of 32. They played Purdue tough. Gonzaga, was 1 possession away basically from potentially passing 1 seed Houston, which would have been a very big upset out of the WCC. Alabama outworked St. Mary's, not necessarily a huge surprise there. Creighton lost to Auburn. Yeah, even just, the Big East. Creighton lost, St. John's lost, Marquette lost in the first round. New Mexico, the Lobos, very nearly beat Michigan State. If anything, they kind of blew that game. They were up 10 basically the entire first half, and then their offense completely fell apart. So, we were seeing a Mountain West team almost take down a 2 seed. So, yeah, Colorado State should have beaten Maryland. They were up 6 with like a minute and a half left, completely collapsed, then hit the biggest nuts 3 of the tournament before, Queen, I believe it was, Patrick Queen on Maryland, just big dogged them and hit just one of the biggest, definitely like one final moment highlight game-winning shot to end that game. But like Colorado State had Maryland. The 12 seed should have advanced to the Sweet 16. And that's out of the Mountain West. So I don't really know what people are talking about. It seems like you're looking at the results and being like, oh, nobody else has a chance. But it's like, no, Colorado State easily could have won. Drake could have won. St. John's got seriously upset. They're out of the Big East. So Gonzaga was right there. So I'm not as worried about that storyline.
I think my concern with it, and it's not really a concern, I'm not worried about the fact that the lower seeded teams aren't making it this far. This is how technically it should be. 13 of the 16 teams left are in those top 1 through 4 seeds. Like there's 3 teams that made it this far that were not a top 4 seed. And that's okay. That's how this tournament technically is supposed to be designed. It's the most chalk tournament I think we've had in a while. But at the same time, the lack of, top tier play from the Big East, like the UConns, Creightons, those teams, is a little surprising. I think they just had a down year, and I think that is something that was surprising to people. And I think that is where the money kind of comes in. It's like Gonzaga not having the year that they could have had. That's Gonzaga's fault. It feels like they had the total amount of talent, things like that. But I think in general, across the entire sport, you have more money in schools that are in the SEC, in schools that are in the Big 10, Big 12. So there's a little bit of a concern there where it's like, hey, the money that is going to these players, the people where you can make the most money, if you're the third best player at Alabama, the people down there are giving you millions of dollars still. Versus if you're the best player at Drake, Great Osabor made $1.5 million, and that was like the biggest NIL deal Washington's ever had. It's like sorry, my cat's over there making a bunch of noise. But there's just like the teams that have money have been just like able to kind of keep growing it. And I think that is a little bit of a concern, but I see where your head's at and where you're coming from with like, this is kind of how it's expected to play out based on the quality of team. Yeah. It's just a little jarring, I think, to most people.
Yeah. I also, I definitely hear you, and there's some evidence to that point just on this season, but very small sample size to be deciding that NIL is bad for parity. Once again, if anything, it's been very good for parity, but it's also just, been more parity for the higher leagues and maybe just pulling more from the lower leagues, which, if Drake can't keep as much talent because, Nebraska is pulling that talent up, I'm fine with that. That's still parity among the big leagues, which is more important to me as a casual viewer. But I also, I kind of, to a certain degree, disagree with the premise. I don't think the third guy on Alabama is making millions. I think the whole purpose of NIL in terms of parity was that, you want to be number 3 on Alabama, or do you want to be number 1 on Ole Miss? Now, once again, that's not Drake, but it's like, okay, yeah, I want to be number 1 on Ole Miss. And then suddenly, instead of Alabama just running the SEC because they have all the best players going there to win a championship, you have players spreading out, maybe among these higher leagues, but still spreading out. And yeah, Gonzaga was an 8 seed. They were top 10 in all the metrics. They should have won a couple more games and been a 3 seed. If they were a 3 seed, they're probably in the Sweet 16 right now. It's not like the Gonzaga's been getting less talent since NIL started. If anything, I've just been frustrated with how much talent we have and maybe our inability to, get the most out of them. BYU just signed the most expensive NIL deal ever to get the number 1 recruit into their program. I don't really see the concern. If the Final Four is the 4-1 seeds, and if Duke wins by 30 in the championship, I'll be more freaked out just because Duke is a program that probably outspends the next 2 programs combined, and that would worry me. But in general, I'm pro NIL, and I'm pro its effects on parity. It might mean less 14 seeds winning in the tournament, but my hope is that it means more 6 seeds reaching the national championship game, which, once again, to me, is more interesting and more fun.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from. And with that, with that discussion, I think the Sweet 16 of this season is probably going to have some of the best games that we've seen in years. Yeah. And I agree with you. I'm here to make the devil's advocate argument of hey, NIL has made this look a little crazy, but at the end of the day, March Madness, the craziness of these games is because they're unpredictable, but those teams and those teams, the 15 seeds making a Sweet 16 run, those teams never win it. Yeah. And the thing about right now is any of these 16 teams can win it. It feels like,
and I think that's super fun.
That's the benefit that we've seen from NIL.
Yeah, 100%. And that's well said of those really low seeds run into a wall at some point, and then we're left with a really crappy game. My dad always says this. I always appreciate it. He's like, man, a crappy first round means you're going to have a really fun second round. And I do think that's true of just oh man, it sucks that Norfolk State didn't upset Florida, but Yeah, Norfolk State, UConn wasn't going to be fun, even if they beat Florida. We all know what we're getting out of Norfolk State. So, yeah, it's like I can't remember who the 16 seed was that beat Virginia, but they got smacked in the second round. It's like, oh yeah, that was probably a fluke that they hit 70% of their threes that game. Yeah, so I agree with you.
Yeah, I kind of equate it to the NBA. It's like, hey, the best teams right now are, the best teams in the East. That first series in the NBA is going to be crap for the NBA playoffs. But like once you get past that first round and you have the top 4 teams from each conference, it's going to be some really nice basketball being played. You're going to, there's a lot of questions about who's going to be winning those matchups, and it makes it really fun. That's what makes the NBA fun, is that there's a lot more evenly spread out talent. And then you have a lot more teams just being good. Obviously, the tanking teams are going to tank, but there's nothing like that in college basketball and March Madness. So
yeah, it's a cool teams don't make the playoff. Yeah. Okay, well that's great. There are a couple just little Q&As I want to ask here because we made it to the Sweet 16. We know what our biggest mistakes are by large. We know what our best successes have been. So St. John's, obviously, we had them as our champion. That's both of our mistake. So we're going to set them aside. You guys know that. We picked St. John's to win it, and they lost to Arkansas. With that being set aside, I want you to give me your biggest success and your biggest failure from your 2 sides of the bracket. And to give you a minute to think about it, I'm going to go first. Obviously, I think my biggest failure was I had Clemson making it to the Elite Eight. They lost to McNeese, so they were one of the biggest quote-unquote upsets of the first round, one of 2 12 seeds, I believe, that upset a 5. And then, yeah, McNeese got slapped by Purdue. So, yeah, I think I overrated Clemson. That's my bad. I'm going to go ahead and eat crow on that one. But other than that, I think those are my only really horrendous picks. And I had St. Mary's making it to the Elite Eight as well, just to the Elite Eight. But I called them beating Vandy, and then they played solid against Bama, so I'm not going to beat myself up too much over that. And then my biggest success, gosh, I wish I'd picked Arizona over Akron. That was another stinger. But you know what I'm going with? I'm going with BYU.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, I called BYU to the Sweet 16. Upset in VCU, upset in Wisconsin, called that as it happened. And then I had them playing St. Mary's and losing. Instead, we'll have them going up against Alabama here. But props to me for having a 6 seed that was correctly called.
All right, I am going to give myself props for a loss is what I'm going to do. I'm going to give myself props in the UConn versus Florida game. Listen, you want to make fun of me here, but UConn played this Florida team to the last possession and had a chance to win it. They lost by 2 points against what basically everybody thought was like they were the second most picked team to win the entire tournament, and to lose by 2 in a game that like could have been decided at any point during that. I think that was a win in my book, in the sense of like, if you're going to take a shot and you're going to prove some people wrong, I feel like UConn was actually a pretty good bet there. You look at any of the other 8-9 matchups, and I guess Gonzaga is probably the next closest one, or not 8-9, sorry, 1 versus 8 or 1 versus 9 matchups. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, Gonzaga was close, but I think that UConn pick was actually not that bad, and I think they would have had an amazing chance to make it to that Elite Eight. So it is tough to see that they lost or to have them lose, but I stand by it. I'm not gonna let you say that was a bad pick, John.
No. I think you deserve some props for that too. They've been so up and down, much like the Zags this season. 2 teams that were both preseason top 5 and both ended up at 8 seeds just because they could not play a consistent stretch throughout the season. But yeah, they absolutely played Florida better than Gonzaga played Houston. Gonzaga put up a valiant effort and had a nice run at the end and just couldn't do it. But like, it would have been a kind of a crazy comeback win if they had pulled it out. UConn was up most of that game. They were up 6 with like 4 minutes left in the second half. And then Florida just put on a really nice run at the end. UConn, and it was a really nice run by Florida. They, at one point they'd scored on like 9 of 12 field goals. And they were only up 2 because UConn was still, running their offense on their end. And then, just came down to some plays at the end. I know Hurley would complain that the refs gave the game to Florida. I don't agree with his whiny ass, but 100%. They almost like Colorado State kind of should have beaten Maryland. UConn kind of should have beaten Florida. And if they had gotten out of that, Maryland's a tough game, but then you have Texas Tech, Arkansas on the other side. They very, very easily could have made it to the Final Four if they'd gotten over Florida, and they very nearly did. So I think that's a fair call.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I'm going to give my worst pick. We're going to go to the South bracket, where I had two major upsets in UCSD beating Michigan and Yale beating Texas A&M. I stand by the UCSD pick. They lost by 3 to a really, really good Michigan team, 68-65. There was a chance that they came back there and won it. Michigan has proven to be very good, but UCSD was like 30-3 at the time of that game. Like, they had a really good season, and I was happy with that upset pick. And I know a lot of people were on that, so I'm not going to say that I was an independent thinker. But still. But the Yale pick was a little horrible. I think
they played a good game. I mean,
they lost by 9. I think my thinking was that Texas A&M was kind of like the highest fraudulent SEC team, and so I was like, oh, they're a little injured. They're not as solid as they could be, and I thought that Yale could beat them just kind of by stats. But Texas A&M looked really good in that game, and then the fact that Michigan was able to stomp them 91-79 was just kind of a crazy outcome. But Michigan looked very good. UCSD looked good. Yale, not as much.
I'm not going to pick on you for picking a 12-13 and having those teams lose. And neither one was a blowout. Neither one lost by double figures. I think those are two fine picks. I think I do need to call you out for a pick, partially because I need to pat myself on the back. This was not my side of the bracket. It was not mine to control. But I have been in on Arkansas. I liked them. You picked Kansas over Arkansas in the first round, and I said, man, I don't know what you're saying. I think Arkansas is a lot better than Kansas. I think that was one of the ones I stopped you, and I was like, man, I think you should pick Arkansas. And then obviously they pull off the really nice upset on St. John's. I think they're going to beat Texas Tech and make it to the Elite Eight. I really like this Arkansas team. I really like the way Cal's coaching them. I was joking. It was funny watching him and Patino in that game, just the two Italians going at it. And it's like, man, I hated Calipari on Kentucky. Just the worst. But him wearing those red checkered suits for the Razorbacks, like, it
reminds me of the Alabama guy.
Yeah,
I don't remember what the Alabama coach's name is, but
also on Arkansas, and it's just like, what? I fucking love this guy. I hope he leads Arkansas to like 3 straight national championships. That would be sick. So I'm all in on Cal, and I'm not saying I would have called the upset, but I did like Arkansas, and I do think you missed on that Kansas pick. Dickinson is trash.
All I'm going to say is you picked Akron to beat Arizona, and they lost by 28. So
Caleb Love showed up. He had a great tournament. He's been really good. He put Oregon away too. He's the reason I didn't have Oregon advance like I called, because he dropped 34 on Oregon or something crazy.
Yeah, he's had a good couple games, but the Caleb Love train will be leaving the station one of these days.
Yeah, I can't. If they beat Duke, I'm gonna buy his jersey. I swear to God. But I do think this is where it ends.
All right. Anything else to say about this tournament? Obviously, we're fans of where it sits right now. We're going to enjoy the next couple weekends of Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final Four, and championship games. But it was definitely a kind of weird tournament season. I think it's been a little different than most have over the last little bit.
Yeah, I've been enjoying it. I'm going to have fun. I'm going to bet on Duke every round until they lose, because I cannot watch Cooper Flagg hold a trophy. I will lose my mind. Cannot wait for him to go to the Charlotte Hornets and fall into obscurity.
I like Cooper Flagg. I don't know what he does to you, but I'm a Cooper Flagg stan.
Something about seeing a white guy in those Duke jerseys just
really grinds your gears.
It's like colonization all over again.
I think he's the first white guy to make me actually like appreciate him on like a Duke jersey.
No
Grayson Allen, no. And what was the guy a couple of years ago? Not Grayson Allen, but like the guy right before him. I don't remember.
And Christian Laettner was big in the 90s.
He was way back in the day.
A guy before Grayson Allen. I
think his last name was started with a P. I don't know. Either way, but it was this is the first.
Oh, was he like Eastern European?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, what was his name?
It's somewhere. It's on the tip of my tongue, but
I think he's on the Utah Jazz now. Shit. Yeah. He was like their stretch 4/5. I remember him.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that guy made me hate him. Grayson Allen made me hate him, but Cooper Flagg is just kind of a dog, and I'm all in. I'm all in on Cooper Flagg.
Well, he's very good at basketball. I'll give him that.
All right. With that, that's basically it in terms of basketball. Now it's time to jump into the Mariners. The Mariners play tonight. They play the Athletics to start the season in, I think, a 4-game series going on over the first weekend. And what we're going to do here, we're going to talk Mariners over-unders after a few notes. The first note that I want to talk about, yesterday, March 25th, the Mariners extended Cal Raleigh on a 6-year, $105 million deal. John, initial thoughts after seeing that?
I would love to see it. Much deserved by Cal. I guess I don't understand the numbers in terms of in context as well as you do. So I want to get your thoughts on where that stands among catcher deals in the MLB. But, anytime you can secure a top, 4 catcher in baseball, I think it's important to do. Cal's 28 now, 29?
Yeah, he might be 27 or 28. Or no,
Okay.
It's 27 to 29, somewhere in that range.
He's right around our age. So, yeah, I think this is a great time to secure him for a long deal. Love getting out of that deal when he's around 34, and then you can either sign him to a 3-year or see where he is in terms of health. But yeah, a good time to invest in him. He's maybe the most beloved Mariner. I mean, is there a chance that just among the common people, he's more loved than Julio? There is a lot of love for Cal out there.
I think the common Seattle Mariners fan would say that Cal is probably their favorite player over Julio.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, and I just think when you can lock down a guy that is certainly a fan favorite and also one of the best at his position in the league for a long-term deal, I think that's always a positive thing. So I've had a lot of negative things to say about Mariners management, and this doesn't negate many of those points. But I do think that this was a smart move.
Yeah, in terms of the actual monetary value, 6 years, $105 million. That kind of kicks in slowly. I think he got a $10 million signing bonus for this deal, and then he gets $1 million this year, and then it shoots up to just right around 20. Kind of waffles above and below 20 over the next 5 years. But that's a great deal for a catcher. Adley Rutschman is going to be making $35 million once he signs his extension with the Orioles. Adley Rutschman. Okay, I guess I'm not even going to talk about Adley Rutschman. This is just a great deal for Cal, and it shows how much he's committed to this Mariners team. And really what I think it is this pitching staff, and it's such a team-friendly deal, and it means to me that Cal really wants these pitchers to stay with him. And that in that sense of Logan Gilbert and George Kirby are going to need extensions, and Cal understands that. Cal doesn't need a ton of money. He doesn't need to be the highest paid player. He wants to be with this pitching staff and with these guys because, first of all, it makes his job easier. He doesn't have to adjust to a new pitcher coming in. And second of all, it just means that this guy is for this team. And to me, it's great for the Mariners. It's great as a fan to know that this guy wants to play or to be with us. It's kind of like the Julio deal from 2 years ago at this point when we extended or gave him that massive deal where it's hey, this guy wants to be a Mariner for life. 34 is kind of you've passed your golden age of catching, and if you want to sign another deal, you can.
But it's not going to break the bank at that point.
Yeah.
You're not signing a deal at 34 for $100 million.
Exactly. And so what that means is that Cal is, in my mind, going to be a Mariners Hall of Famer. At this point, Cal's going to have been with the team for 10 years at that point, and he'll have cemented himself as probably the greatest Mariners catcher of all time. Mm-hmm. That's really cool to think about for me. And I think in the sense of it's helping the team, it's as the years go by and the team, is able to spend more money, that deal gets better and better, So all things considered, I think it's a great deal for the Mariners. It's great for Cal. He got his bag, and he was going to be in arbitration over the next few years, and they basically got rid of that. They're hey, we're going to pay you what we think you're worth, and it's going to be great. And you saying he's a top 4 catcher is just not enough. Like, this is a top 2 catcher in the league. Like, everybody knows that. Everybody knows that this is a top 2 catcher.
Him and Adley, those are the 2 names you're saying.
Yeah, it's like maybe Contreras is like the third, and he could kind of vie for a spot. But Cal is like, as a defensive catcher, he's the best. He just won the Platinum Glove for the best defensive player in the American League. It's like, this guy is one of, if not the top catchers in the league. And top 4 is not really that bad, but you just have to know that.
And I do think the Contreras comparison is a good one, just in terms of, Contreras a little over the hill at this point, certainly, older. But, in his prime was a lot like Cal in terms of, he was the best defensive catcher in baseball for a time. And I think both of their offensive games are a little bit limited, and it's hard. It's really rare to see a catcher who brings, A-tier offensive output to a team. I just think the way you play that position is just hard on your body, and I just think it's hard to, get up off the ground and bat 300. But Contreras was a guy that was like a perennial, in his prime, was a perennial like 275 guy, but was not generating nearly the power that Cal is. And I think Cal's just, flipped it a little bit. You're getting a little more slugging and a little less efficiency. But okay, I'm really glad to hear the value aspect of it. Yeah, so are you pretty confident? And once again, I think the really good part of this deal for Cal is now this money is locked in. He didn't have to go through arbitration. So this is, 2 years in advance of when he might be normally getting a deal like this. But he gets it now. But you're saying that, he might be as much as, $25 million over the course of the contract underpaid for his talent level. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Yeah. As at the end of the day, Cal he came into the league at like 24. Like he was kind of an old breakout in terms of when he was able to start playing for the Mariners. I'm gonna let that fire truck go by while I finish talking. And he came in at 24. He's been playing, I think, for a few years now, and so he's like, if he were to go those extra 2 years into arbitration, he'd be 29, 30, and it's like getting a deal like this at that point. Granted, he might have been able to do if he continued to produce for the next 3 years, but it's like that's not assured. And so at the end of the day, he's probably getting as much as he would have gotten in that deal ahead of time, and then he, at that point, he can sign a couple $10 million deals or whatever it is, and he'll be okay.
Sure. So. That's well said. That's well broken down. So because that's a big number of like, oh, he's leaving $25 million on the table, but it's like, okay, no, maybe he wouldn't be getting that value 2 years from now. So in a way, he's taking the marshmallow now and not waiting to see if there's a second marshmallow down the road. So I certainly hope part of the reason is he's like, I want to be here. I want these pitchers to get paid, but it's also a good deal for Cal in that he doesn't have to worry now about a hip injury derailing his career and him never getting the bag. Now he has the bag. So, I think that's well said. Big win-win. Really glad to lock him down. Do you know what Rutschman's putting up in terms of statistics? Do you know what he hit last year? How many home runs he put out?
I don't. I'll pull it up. And while I do that,
I was just curious.
Yeah, I'll pull it up. While I do that, I want you to talk about the Mariners and their, talking about guys making money. The Mariners just released Mitch Haniger on Monday or Sunday, and they're eating, $15.5 million of that contract. But just talk to me about your thoughts on that, and then I'll kind of get into what that means for the team going forward.
Sure. You know how I feel about Haniger. I feel like there have been a lot of these guys that are just kind of hangers-on in terms of they're not really bringing productivity. I think the Mariners don't necessarily mind having them around, especially when they're names that fans like. I think it's a step in the right direction to be like, hey, we as an organization, we're going to eat this, but it's not going against the salary cap. It's just coming out of management's pockets at that point. When you cut a guy, you can sign a guy for that same value, even if you're paying out the last guy. Yeah. So what that does is it does open up cap space. Not that the Mariners have ever been in a hurry to fill cap space. But, you're essentially calling a spade and saying, Haniger, we don't think you're going to contribute anything real to this team. Why don't we turn your dead money into empty space? And then they can potentially fill that space up with something more useful, or sit on it like a hoarding dragon and never try to win baseball games. Just two options.
Well, so the real thing with that is that the $15.5 million is still going to him. And so with that being the case, they're basically like, hey, Mitch, you're not going to be playing for our team. We're freeing up the roster space so that we can have somebody else come in. Say it's a Ryan Bliss, because Haniger can't be in AAA. What is happening outside?
Dude, that's coming through so clearly that both times I was like, is that fire truck outside of my house?
No, they're just right through the neighborhood. Anyways, so Mitch is getting that $15.5 million, but it frees up the roster spot because he can't go down to AAA. He doesn't have options or anything like that. So it's like, hey, Ryan Bliss, a guy who we kind of were on the fence about, but he's really proven himself to be pretty useful in that second base position. And especially at a really good spring, like that's a really nice option for them to have start with the team. And it also means that like if they want to bring up a young guy, if they want to have Ben Williamson, come in and play a few games at third base, he can do that without them having to worry about sending Mitch Haniger down or releasing him already. It's like that is done. They basically now can flip-flop a bunch of guys, option those players, and do what they need to do with their younger guys. And I think it is indicative of like, hey, we knew that we weren't going to be able to offload this contract. It's like this entire offseason they've been so worried about trying to free up money and do all that stuff and move Mitch Haniger's contract. But I think at the end of the day, they knew that, and that's probably why they didn't spend the money that they did. And I'm not making excuses for them, but I'm saying, they are understanding of how teams are reacting to them trying to give up Mitch Haniger's contract. Teams do not want Mitch Haniger on their team. And so they just couldn't deal with that in that way. Which is kind of sad. Mitch Haniger, obviously a great Mariner, but he's just a guy who's past his golden age, we'll say. So the Mariners did a good thing there. I don't think there's anything wrong with them releasing Mitch Haniger, paying him his money, and now he can either, if he wants to, go seek a contract or just go chill for the season and just go rest those knees and hips and everything that he's had wrong with his body,
Yeah. Yeah, that reminds me of something, just talking about the Cal contract too. Just like, I understand we're not in their position. We don't have a wife in our ear saying they want to buy a new Rivian for their kid, but...
You don't.
But it is just one of those things of like, man, if you can have $100 million and everyone in the city you live in is going to love you and they're going to be putting your face on posters long after you're done and you're going to be in the Ring of Honor and you're going to come out when you're in your mid-50s and everyone's going to chant your name. Is that not worth more than $125 million? Of just like, you get $100 million. Like, you also get $100 million. At that point, the difference between $0 and $25 million is huge. The difference between $100 million and $125 million does not seem to me to be nearly as large. Easy to say when I'm not looking at the numbers, but it is one of the reasons. Like, yeah, Cal, take a discount. Like, why didn't fewer people not do the Brady thing of just like, yeah, I'm going to make a little bit less. I don't need to be the highest paid at my position, and just make it easier to compete and to win. And then, on the other hand, it's like, yeah, $15 million is a lot. Now retire. Chill the fuck out. You're not good at baseball anymore. Stop playing baseball. Go read a book about World War II. Like, Jesus.
It wouldn't doubt me if Mitch Haniger was already reading books about World War II while also playing baseball.
Yeah, that's probably fair. I love Mitch. I do. But it is one of those things, too. It's like, I love Mitch Haniger. We don't owe Mitch Haniger anything as a fan base. He's a role guy. These guys come in, they play, and then we say adieu when they're done. Like, and it's adieu time for Mitch Haniger. Like, take your money, go buy a World War II plane, and chill.
Yeah. I do have Adley Rutschman's stats pulled up. We can compare with Cal. So Adley, he started 1 year after Cal, so in 2022, he had an 806 OPS, 13 home runs, and 254 average. Pretty decent. Basically 20 or 30 points above where Cal was in terms of average and OPS. And then last year, or I guess 2 years ago, 2023, he had an 809 OPS, so really consistent. 20 home runs, 277 average, so a better year. I think he signed an extension that year. And then last year, 709 OPS, 250 average, and 19 home runs. So he's just like kind of hovering right around that like 700 to 800 mark. And, his peaks are probably going to be higher than Cal's, I would say. But Cal has been consistent. Over his last 3 years, he's had 27 home runs, 30 home runs, and 34 home runs. So obviously more than Adley by 10, at least 15 in some cases.
Yeah, about 30% more.
Averages of 211, 232, and 220, so a little lower than Adley's, but his OPS has been 774, 762, and 748, so right in the middle. And I think what that means is Cal's consistency is more valued than like the Adley peaks, which if you get a peak season from Adley Rutschman, he could be an MVP guy, but at the same time, you're kind of he's waffling around. He's got to have a really good year to do that.
Yeah.
Cal's going to be really good every single year.
And Adley's like a good defensive catcher too. He's not bad, but obviously Cal significantly better at that very important role of his position as well.
Yep.
Yeah, Adley's number is very, very similar to Contreras back in the day, so no surprise there. Interesting. Good to know. Yeah, Cal. It is always a good reminder too. It's like home runs are so valuable, and you're talking about Adley's stats, and it's like, oh man, yeah, 250 and 20 home runs. It's like, yeah, it'd just be nice to be over 250, and it's like, oh, 230 and 32 home runs? I will definitely take that. Sometimes I just have to be reminded how many more home runs 32 is than 20.
Yeah, that's like, you really think about that. That's like 60% more home runs. Like that's a lot.
That's winning 4 baseball games just with your home runs. Fascinating. Okay, well, thanks. That's a good reminder on that. And yeah, I feel very good about Cal. And I feel very good about Mitch. Relax, Mitch.
One more note before we get into the over-unders. The Root Sports streaming service. I'm just going to give you my thoughts, John. You don't even have to say anything. This is a podcast. This is for the people.
Oh, thank God.
But Root Sports and the Mariners announced a streaming service that is for people in the Seattle area. But it's a streaming service that basically allows you to pay $20 a month and watch all the Mariners games. Root Sports is just, they're always on cable, and so it's kind of tough. It's been tough to watch them if you don't have cable. And so it was just a streaming service for that. And a lot of people like it. It's basically if you play 25 to 30 games a month, it's $1 or less per game to just watch at home, which is a pretty good deal, all things considered. And you don't have to go get the cable bundle, all that kind of stuff. People like it. They want to make the Mariners accessible, and this is a good thing for that. I can't get it where I am, but it is nice in the sense of, hey, the Mariners they did a lot of good things this week is kind of what I'm getting at. Like with the streaming releasing Mitch Haniger and extending Cal, like those are 3 really good things that the Mariners did as an organization that should make everybody pretty excited. So good news for them.
Don't you start being encouraged by Mariners decision making. Yeah, Root Sports things is good to hear. It's great. As somebody that would never illegally watch free streams of baseball games on the internet, I'm really excited to hear there's a place I can finally spend money to watch them, because I would never visit illegal, nefarious.
I'm going to have to blur those out.
Free sites to watch baseball, so it's good to know Root's back.
All right. Anyways, we are going to talk Mariners over-unders. And anything to say before we do that, John? Do you want to describe what's happening? I can do that as well.
Yeah. Feed it out.
All right. So I've basically taken the bulk of the substantial Mariners players, which are, the top 7 hitters or so, and then the bulk of the pitchers, obviously all the starters, and then a few of the relievers. And we are just going to do over-unders on one of their stats that I've picked out based on steamer projections on Fangraphs. So those come from steamerprojections.com, just so you guys know. That's just Fangraphs is where I found it. But the first thing that we have to do, actually, we'll do that last. I think that's a last thing. So the first person that I want to do and talk about is Jorge Polanco. Polanco, obviously a down year last year. He is projected to have an average of 222 on Steamer. Do you think we go higher or lower on that?
Gosh. I hate you for finding such a good stat like that, because every fiber of my being wants to just throw shade at Jorge and pick the under, but I think he's, even at his diminished self, I think he's just better than a 220 hitter, so I'm going to say over. I'm going to say he cracks 230, but barely.
I think last year, I can't remember if he was 210 or like 198. It was him and Garver I got mixed up average-wise all the time.
Well, that's because they looked very similar out there.
Yeah.
Our
but
two walk kings.
Jorge is, I agree with you. He's a better player than what we saw last year. The projections, see him returning a little bit more to form, but I think we're actually going to see him produce a little bit better than he did. And I would take the over as well. And I hope we don't take the over on everything. There's going to be some more discussion, but that's the first one.
I wanted to take, if you would have set the line at like 230, I probably would have taken the under. But at 220, there's too much value above. Yep. This was a guy that was hitting like 270 2 years ago.
All right, let's bounce to the pitchers. Logan Gilbert, a guy who many have as a Cy Young favorite, especially in the Mariners realm. He had his odds for Cy Young plus 1,100. And I think a big part of that would be his number of wins. He's projected to have 12 wins. John, what do you think about that?
Okay, this is fantastic. That's a big number. That is a big number, and I do think, as of really important pitching stats, it's also tough because you can, give up one earned run over, 8 innings and lose the game. So I'm going to go under on 12 wins. I just think, what did he end up with last year? Did he have 13 last year?
I think he was like 10 and 13. Like, it was crazy. He had such a good year, but he had like 10 wins. He had kind of a Felix-esque year.
Yeah, classic. So I think under 12. I do think it's one of those things where, he can be phenomenal and just come up underneath that number because of team performance. And I also just think, he could. I'm not certain he's going to be better this year than he was last year because he was absolutely tremendous last year. I think 12 is just too big of a number for a Mariners offense that I am reasonably skeptical about.
All right, I'm going to differ from you here. I think in terms of the way that Logan Gilbert is being talked about and the Cy Young conversation that is to be had for him already, it's like, hey, this guy, coming into this season, this guy could be a Cy Young contender. He's a top 5, basically, Cy Young odds guy right now in terms of the American League. To be a Cy Young contender, usually you have to have like 14 wins at minimum. And I think that Logan has the potential to be like a 16-win guy. And 12 is just like kind of looking at the past iterations of this team and saying, hey, there's no way they're going to give this guy run support. This is also will tie into the future discussion to be had about this team in general. But I think that this team is going to be better than people project them to be. And with that comes the Logan Gilbert over 12 wins for me.
Okay, yeah, you know what? With that reasoning, I completely understand where you're coming from. I think I'm not going to believe that they're going to provide better run support until I see it with my eyes.
It's fair.
Yeah, if they would have, signed Juan Soto in the offseason, I would definitely be taking over 12 wins. But for me, it's not a talent issue. It's certainly a run support issue. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see who's right on that one.
Yep. And I think Gilbert's just such a fun pitcher. I think the non-decisions will be crucial to this line, which is why wins don't matter. If you're a pitcher, if you're listening to this and you haven't heard that, wins as a pitching stat do not matter. We just like looking at them and discussing over-unders. So just keep that in mind. All right, going to the hitters. We're gonna talk about the most electric hitter on this roster, and that will finally say his name and talk about him a little bit more than we already have. Julio Rodriguez.
Randy Arozarena.
Julio is currently projected by Steamer to have 28 home runs and 26 stolen bases. So I'm going to give you an easier line. Is he going to have a 25-25 season? Does he have 25 home runs and 25 stolen bases in his bag?
Oh man. Yeah, I'm going to go under again. This is good because you're going to bring the optimism and I can return to my natural state, which is to be pessimistic about baseball. But 25 steals, yes, I see it. I see the vision for sure. 20 home runs, I also see. But I do if he hits 25 home runs in T-Mobile, I will be pumped. That will be amazing for the Mariners. If he hits 25 home runs for the Mariners, I think Gilbert gets the Cy Young. I'll tell you that. I think from what we've seen from hitters in the past and from Arozarena last year, it's just not the easiest ballpark to hit home runs in. I think he comes up short on that part of the 25-25.
I'll tell you what, the 25-25 is a tough mark to hit.
I think it might be easier for him to hit 20 and 30.
You think so? Maybe. But in terms of this, I was looking at FanDuel odds for home runs. They don't even have him at the 30 home run threshold, which is interesting. Like, you can't even bet on Julio to have 30 home runs, which is kind of crazy. But in terms of stolen bases, we saw the Mariners reduce the amount of stolen bases that he had last season, and that was, I think, to preserve his body. You know, the Mariners want to make sure that this guy is playing as many games as possible, and stealing bases is something that Julio doesn't necessarily need to be doing. He's going to be driving Victor Robles in. He's going to be driving, Randy. I guess Randy's probably going to be hitting behind him, but it's like Julio will be on second more than he is just sitting on first. That's not true, but like, he doesn't need to steal bags. It's like he's going to be driven in by the natural talent of the guys behind him. He doesn't need to necessarily steal as many bags. He just needs to be fast. And Randy's going to hit a lot of doubles this year. So that's the plan. I think the stolen bases part is where he's going to struggle. So I'm going to actually go under here as well.
That's really funny. To be completely honest with you, while joking that we were talking about Randy Arozarena instead of Julio, my entire conversation there was thinking Randy in my head. And I was like, that number seems huge for Randy to hit 25 home runs. It's like, I just don't think there's any way he's going to do that. Julio hitting 25, we've seen him do that.
That's why I was a little shocked at your take on the home runs, but continue.
With him, I do think the steals will be because again, I do think like Randy will be behind him. Julio will be stealing less. I think we'll be seeing Randy stealing more, because I think Randy will be at the tail end of, like, he will be the last bat driving in our really good on base guys. And then, he'll be like, they're taking the gloves off Randy and be like, hey, man, get to third if you can, because we cannot guarantee you any support from these batters behind you.
We'll see. It depends on how they decide to stack them up. If it's Robles, Julio, Randy, Cal, then it's, hey, Randy, stay wherever you are. Cal will drive you in with a home run.
Yes,
we'll see. All right, moving down back to the pitchers, I have got Bryce Miller as the second pitcher to talk about, and I think he's a tricky one. And the reason for this is Bryce Miller as a pitcher he's kind of overperformed, and I think there's a little bit of reverse bias here when it comes to regression, and they've got his ERA sitting at 3.9. Do you got lower or higher than that?
I definitely have lower. So in that case, I'm taking the over. I'm believing in Bryce in comparison to that stat. I definitely think he'd be under. You said 3.9?
Yep.
Yeah, wasn't he like 2.9 last year? 3.1?
I think he was like 3.3 or 3.4.
Okay, all right. But still, I think Bryce is getting better every year. He's not going to be put in a position where there's way more pressure on him as a pitcher. He'll still be our number 4 guy. So I think Bryce is in a great position. I think I could see Bryce having like a Gilbert-like arc where it's just like each year it's like, oh man, he looks better than he did last year. And then before you know it, it's like, wait, is he the best pitcher on this team? I see that kind of trek for Bryce Miller. I really, really believe in him as a player. I don't see any reason to be pessimistic about his statistical season in this upcoming year. I'm taking all the overs on Bryce numbers. I guess under on ERA.
I understand where you're coming from on that. I think the major thing for Bryce is he's got a really high fly ball ratio, and when he's pitching away from T-Mobile Park, everybody was talking about it this offseason. It's like T-Mobile Park keeps the ball in the park, but when you got Bryce Miller at other parks like a Camden Yards or like a Fenway, it's like this guy has the potential to give up home runs. He gives up a lot of fly balls. I think he's got a 37% ground ball rate, and the other guys on this pitching staff have like around a 40. It's not much, but that extra 3% is significant. So when it comes to like Bryce Miller is projected to have the highest ERA on this pitching staff in terms of starters. And I believe that there's a reason for that. I think he's going to hover right around 3.9. This is a really tough line for me. I think if he gets above 4, that's like a bad Bryce Miller season. But I am going to say that he has above a 3.9. I think it's going to be like a 3.95. Like, it's going to be real close.
Okay, I bet you he falls under 3.7. So
We'll see. I'm documenting all this for those of you that are hearing me type away after everything that we say. I'm documenting our bets.
Good. This is good. I'm a believer. I am a believer. So I appreciate what you're saying. Yeah, fly ball rate's always interesting. But, I feel like a lot of elite pitchers, there are basically two types of elite pitchers. Pitchers that are more likely to surrender power, but just surrender a lot less of it, and pitchers that do not surrender power, but are more susceptible to, hitting runs and runs of hitting. I just think Bryce is, I think he's elite at what he does.
Yeah, that's very fair. The ride on his fastball, I think, can induce weak fly balls, but still fly balls. So there's something to be said for that too. And I also think Wu is going to be just like really dominant. I have Wu being one of my better pitchers for this season. Back to the hitters.
I love the Wu call.
Back to the hitters. We've got J.P. Crawford, our boy, our shortstop of the season, our captain. 122 games played. That's the projection for him. They're projecting him to probably get injured for a little over a month, a little under a month. Go on the 30-day IR or something like that. How do we feel about that for JP?
Man, this is why Vegas is undefeated, man. They're just some good lines. Like, man, hard to take the under. I just believe in him, and he's coming off a year. What did he play last year? Like 90 games last year?
I think like 100. Yeah, he did not play that many games. He had that hamstring injury in May, I believe.
Yeah, a really nagging ham, but really nagging ham, man. But yeah, it's just. I guess
it's hard to bet against these guys too. It's just like so hard to be like, these guys aren't going to do what we want them to.
Yeah, he's probably going to miss a lot of time, but he is just, he's getting older is part of the thing. Part of the reason that I'm a little worried is just like it's okay for guys to get to the point where they're playing 110 baseball games a year. But I guess he's getting older. What is he now? 31?
No, he's like 29, I think.
Oh, really? Okay, he's even younger than I thought. Okay. Yeah, I think coming off a year where he really got, strung up a couple times and not able to get on the field, I think he has a bounce back year in terms of performance. I'll take the over on 122. But shout out to Vegas. That's an excellent line.
Yeah, I think he's going to play, if barring injury, I'm assuming that JP does not get injured, but I think the Mariners will take it a little easier on him, give him some platoon opportunities when it comes to playing Dylan Moore at shortstop, playing Leo Rivas at shortstop, and just giving him more off days. I think he'll play something around like the 135 to 140 range, and they won't ride him as hard as they have over the last couple seasons. Because that's the kind of stuff where you get the wear and tear. That's why you see basketball players on their load management days. It's like you got to give JP some time off. The guy's a fragile shortstop, so I like him having like 130 to 140 games played.
Yeah, I like that a lot too.
Next guy. We're going back to pitchers. We're bouncing back and forth. Pitchers. We got your favorite guy, George Kirby, our king of not allowing any walks. And we're going to talk about his walks right now. 1.38 walks per 9 innings. How do you feel about that? That's a very, very low number. Obviously the lowest of the Mariners staff, but higher than he has been over the last couple seasons. What do you think?
Yeah, I need context on this one. I do have his numbers for the last couple of years. I wouldn't, if you just told me that number out of nowhere without associating it to Kirby, if you would have just said, hey, pitcher A on the Orioles is allowing 1.38 walks per 9 innings, I wouldn't really know if that was good or bad. I guess I'd suspect that it's good, but yeah, I need context.
Yeah, so over the last 3 seasons, in 2022, he had 1.5 walks per 9 innings. In 2023, his All-Star season, he had 0.9 walks per 5 innings, and last year he had 1.1. So a little bit of a regression, but he's been a guy who doesn't really walk anybody. In terms of walk percentage, he was hovering around like 4 to 6 over the last few years, and that is elite. That's like a really elite stuff in terms of walks per 9.
Yeah. Okay, I think I will take the under on that walk rate. I do think, considering that he stayed under it last year while, having some struggles, it's nice to see that he really was able to maintain. It's like, yeah, I'm going to struggle a little bit, but I'm not letting you get on base if you don't earn it. I do think the ability that he's shown that for 2 years straight, I feel good about that. I'm actually all in on a George Kirby bounce back season in terms of statistics. I think he will be better this year than he was last year, so to assume that he would get fairly worse at allowing walks seems counterintuitive to me. So I'm taking the under there.
Yeah, I like that. There's been a lot of discussion in terms of George Kirby's supreme efficiency being kind of an issue, I think, because hitters know that he's not going to throw a ball, he's not going to walk them, and thus they're willing to swing, willing to foul off a ton of pitches, get into those deep counts because they know he's not going to want to throw a ball. I think that there will be some sort of dialing and fine-tuning of George Kirby's, being more like Randy Johnson and less like Jamie Moyer when it comes to his pitching style, and just being a little bit more quote-unquote wild. He'll just throw a little bit more balls outside of the strike zone and less balls that end up, do a little bit more of the back foot curveballs, back foot slider to lefties, and a little bit less curveballs that break into the zone, because that can also cause some ERA issues and, people getting on base, things like that. Will it get down to 1.38? I do not think so. I think it's going to be under that as well. But I do think there's some fine-tuning to be had for the Mariners and George Kirby there.
I appreciate that. That is well thought out. The idea that, sometimes his desire to be mega efficient can actually be detrimental to his pitching is very interesting. And I could see them sitting him down and say, George, we love you, buddy, but we need you to give up.
We need you to peg a guy in the dome every once in a while, once a month.
Yeah. Every once in a blue moon. So, yeah, that's well said. That could bite him, I suppose, but I still think he holds out.
Yeah, I think he had a down year last year, and I think a lot of people attributed it to that. And whether that was the actual cause or not, it felt like that was the reason. And people adjusting to kind of his lack of being able to throw a ball outside the zone. So we'll see.
God, don't you hate it when the hitters are getting better because they just know you can't miss? Unbelievable.
All right, next one, we've got the dumper, Cal Raleigh. He is
Mr. $100 million himself.
I know, he's a big three true outcomes guy, and one of those outcomes is a strikeout. So, Fangraphs Steamer has the strikeout percentage for Cal Raleigh at 27.5. That's pretty high. League average sits right around 26, so it's a little higher. Julio, I think, is like 23-ish. Actually, league average might be more around 22. Maybe it was the Mariners were 26, and that's why they struggled so much. But
I was going to say, there's no way Julio's under the league average in terms of strikeouts. I love Julio, but that dude strikes out. Yeah, you're right. You're definitely right about Cal being a three true outcomes guy. I'm going to go ahead and take the over on strikeout rate just because I want his average creeping over 250, but he's the one guy on the Mariners where that's least important.
Yeah.
We are going to be just really, really desperate for his slugging. I think he knows that. I think he's known it the last couple of years. He cannot be afraid to uncork. And that's going to lead to a higher strikeout rate. I think seeing him sit somewhere just under 30%, it should not be unexpected.
Yeah, he has never had a batting or a strikeout percentage below 27.8. So to expect him to go below 27.5 would be would be quite the miracle.
Year.
Would be quite the adjustment. Yeah. So I'm in agreement with you there. I think he's going to stay right above that one.
All love to Cal too. People don't typically have their best seasons right after making $100 million. It's tough.
That's very fair. That's very fair.
You can afford all sorts of cool new things. It's tough out there.
He can go eat whatever he wants. He's not going to have to worry about eating chicken and rice.
Only the fanciest chicken. Just Costco rotisseries all day for this guy.
He's Korean barbecue, all you can eat. That's all he wants. All right.
Ooh,
that sounds good right now. I'm getting hungry. Let's speed this up a little bit. All right. Up next, we've got Luis Castillo. And we're just going to go innings total for him. 184 innings. Last year, I think he was sitting right around the mid-170s. I don't have his numbers right now, but I can pull them up. But, yeah, 184 innings. Gilbert was the most in baseball last year at just above 200. So 184 is quite a lot, and that, I think, comes down to Luis making a lot of good starts. How do we feel about that?
Yeah, I'm taking the under on that for a couple of reasons. I just think there are a lot of outcomes that can lead to the under here. He can have a great year, but due to Kirby and Gilbert and Bryce all being amazing, Luis could potentially be our fourth best pitcher, and maybe we just don't need him quite as much. Maybe when I do think also with hopefully our bullpen being much healthier this year. Remember, this is supposed to be one of the best bullpens in baseball when it's healthy. I think we could be seeing all these guys' innings pitched drop by 20 innings this year just because they have so much more bullpen help. We don't need to take them as deep. So I think better bullpen, his role among the staff potentially decreasing, and there's and those are all, he could be just as good, if not better. There's also the chance he doesn't play as well, gets pulled earlier more often. He's obviously still very, very good, but he is getting older. He's on the wrong side of 30, and every year we should expect some level of decrease. I think all those things together, I feel pretty good taking the under.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you there. I'm not gonna talk too long about it. Luis is a guy who's frequently struggled to go super late into games because his pitch count, he's a little bit more erratic. He's got the higher strikeout ratio. That's why George Kirby, we've seen him go so late. It's because he induces a lot of ground balls, a lot of fly balls, and makes people hit the ball, which reduces your pitch count and lets you go deeper into games. Luis is not that kind of guy. He's a strikeout guy, and with that comes the struggle to get to, he didn't have nearly as many quality starts as the other guys last year because he threw 5 innings and threw 5 shutout innings, but got to 120 pitches over that time. And it's just tough for a guy to throw 184 innings in 31, 32 starts. That you have to go basically over 6 innings every single start to do that. So it can just be tough. That's a high number, and I believe he's going to make every start. I don't think Castillo is going to come into this season and have any injury troubles, but I think 184 is just quite a lot for him.
Yeah, well said. I didn't even think the actual style of pitching is not the most conducive. That's an excellent point.
Yeah. All right. John's favorite guy, the one that he's the most excited to talk about now in terms of the hitters, Mr. Randall Arozarena himself. I've got him. We're going to talk about his RBIs. We're going to talk about his ability to drive in runs. Steamer projects him to have 77 RBIs. What do you think?
Yeah, once again, context-wise, I'm not great at just what does 77 mean, but I'm going to go ahead and just shoot blind from the hip on this one. I'm very excited for the way Randy's going to fit into this offense, and I am just pretty excited for our top 4 guys in our lineup to work through, and I do think his best spot is probably right behind Julio before Cal, and that just gives Cal the ability of kind of bat and clean up to a certain degree, and just I think Randy's going to be in a position to drive in Robles and Julio when Julio doesn't just finish the job by himself. The one thing we did see from Randy, his slugging was definitely down after coming to the Mariners. He had a really slow start, but then things really came together pretty nicely for him. And he's an on-base god. He's my kind of guy. I love that about him, and I do just think he's great in big spots. I remember we were looking at it last year. His numbers with hitters in scoring position, or with runners in scoring position, are really, really good. He definitely plays better when he knows there's a guy that's going to get an RBI for him. So I'm going to go ahead and lean optimistic on this one. Maybe the only Mariners hitter I'll pick an optimistic stat on, and I'll say over on RBIs for Randy.
Yeah, I think Randy hitting in that 3 spot, if that's going to be where he ends up, is going to be very, very nice for him. He had a down year last year, and he still had close to 77 RBIs. And it's if this guy performs a fraction of what he was doing a couple of years ago, it's this guy could have 85, 90 RBIs. I like the over on that as well.
Nice. I will say, we've been optimistic, we've been pessimistic, but we've been basically on the same page with all of
this.
Yeah,
I'm looking at it, and it's the only 2 that we were different on were Gilbert and Miller. So we're doing pretty good so far. This next one, I think we're both going to be on the same page here. Brian Wu, 26 starts. This is purely is Brian Wu going to get injured? Is that what we think is going to happen to this guy? What are your thoughts on that one?
I'll see. I do think it's a little more complicated than that, just because we've talked about this before. It's do we really think Wu's long-term position with this team is as a starter? What are the odds that he, folds into more of a relief type guy? I do think with our pitching staff, the way it's assembled right now, but the problem is he's just too good at it when he does play, I guess. But he also gets hurt all the time. Can I defer on this? Can I conscientiously object from picking on this one? Because If he stays healthy and if they don't move him to more heavy relief work, then yes. But I just don't know.
Here's what I'll say about this. Wu will make 26 starts at the very least. As the optimistic guy here, Wu's going to make 26 starts. It's will he make 26 amazing starts? Probably not. He's probably going to have a couple where he comes out from arm tightness. He's probably going to have a couple where he's just like a little off and comes out after 2-3 innings. But Brian Wu will start in that fifth spot basically every single game this season. I think, the Kirby injury is going to make the Mariners even more worried to have their guys throw a lot of innings. And
That's
so
a good point.
With that, Wu's going to make those starts, but we'll see how deep he really goes into these games. I like the over on it, and I'm going to make you take that with me.
Okay. That's fair. You talked me into it. I did forget that we're going to be missing Kirby for a number of games at the start of the year. So that it leans into one of those things where, where does he ultimately belong? I don't know. But if his first couple starts are really good, they're not going to move him to relief work if he's giving you good starts.
No, he's a guy, unless something happens where it's like Logan Evans really wants to come in or has proven himself to be a really good starter, Brian will be our fifth starter for at least this season, if not also next one. But it's a real question of like how can his arm handle it? Like if he struggles halfway through the season to throw 150 innings, it's like, okay, maybe this guy is destined to be a reliever. But for now, I think the Mariners are planning on having him be that fifth starter. So
yeah, and it is just that question of we haven't seen him make it through a full season without fairly significant injury issues.
Yeah.
So there is that question of, but the problem is he's just so damn good when he's pitching.
Yeah.
It's like, man, we don't want to see you for 2 innings. We want to see you for 6. But can we literally get that from you? Kind of unique. I'm sure that stuff happens in pitching more than we would think, but I'm just not used to guys where it's like, no, man, we would love for you to start, but you're just physically more built to be a reliever.
Just a fragile baby.
Just a little baby. Just a little baby bird. But yeah, we both love Wu. All-time jersey for sure. Hopefully we see it from him.
Yep. All right, next guy is an interesting one. Victor Robles, last year, had an OPS hovering right around 700. He doesn't have a lot of slugging, so that's why his OPS doesn't get too high. Fangraphs and Steamer have him projected to be at an OPS of 690, which I've told you before. An OPS of 700 is like league average, so they expect him to be a little bit below a league average hitter. And that's our leadoff guy as of right now. What do we think about that?
Yeah, that's crazy to me. Obviously, this is why I don't like OPS personally, and I know you think I'm crazy for that. This is why I'm just more of a meat and potatoes guy. It was like, give me their average and give me the number of home runs they hit, and that's fine with me. And it's one of those things where, yeah, he might have been close to league average in terms of OPS because his slugging is close to non-existent. Like, I'm not sure how many doubles that guy hit last season, let alone home runs. But he is just an absolute star at getting the ball, into a gap for a single. That's why he's just a great leadoff guy. He ended up last year batting 285, I think.
Something like that, yeah.
And this has been 2 straight full seasons where he's ended up batting over 280. That is really, really good. And it's really, really valuable for a team, particularly at the leadoff spot, to the guy that's going to be on base. It essentially doubles Julio's value when he has the bat in his hand if there's a guy already on first base. So it's immensely valuable. Now, and here's the rub. That being said, I could very easily see him fall below an OPS of 700 because, I'm not sure he's going to be able to bat 285 again this year. If he batted 270 for us, I'd be very pleased. I wouldn't, want to cut his contract. I'd still be pleased with that. And I'm very confident his slugging is not improving. I just think I've seen hitters like him before, and I know what he's bringing, and it's not going to be power ever. So, if his batting falls a little bit, his OPS could very easily drop below 700. I just want to make it very clear that even if it does, that does not mean I think he's a below average hitter.
Yeah, I think I just kind of fully agree with you here. In a rare case of, hey, I'm not all in on the OPS for this guy. The slugging is not what makes Robles valuable. It's this guy getting on base, disturbing the pitcher's flow, and doing the thing that people don't do nowadays, which is actually be on base and not hit home runs, just hit singles and hit 290. It's like if he could do that and give Julio the opportunity to be better, the Mariners value him so much more in that way. It's like, hey, statistically, he might not be like a top tier OPS guy, but if he is providing that kind of value, that's still a great leadoff hitter. And the fact that people would be upset about that is kind of a little frustrating to me, because I totally see where you're coming from. So I'm going to take the under as well. But this guy, if this guy hits 300 and has 8 home runs, that's going to be right around 690. Like, he doesn't have to do much to have a 690 OPS, but I still think like he's probably going to hit more like 270 in a full season at T-Mobile, dealing with the Marine layer, and less home runs during the entirety of the season because of that as well. Like, I think the OPS is going to struggle, but I still think he's going to provide value at the batting average category.
Yeah, I do just think, I understand, particularly in modern baseball, why slugging and power is rated as highly as it is. But I do think with these all-encompassing stats, it is just a little overrated. The idea that a guy can bat 230 with 20 home runs and have a higher OPS than a guy batting 300 with like 5 home runs, that doesn't make sense. Like, I get the value of those home runs. One of those guys are not the same equivalent value over 160 games.
I think the value of that is, and the problem that baseball has right now is, it's like they're looking at individual players and the value that those players have as individuals. And it's like Victor Robles' value is actually 75% of that is for Julio. It's like, his value comes from being able to disturb the pitcher and make the pitcher have to do worse things. It doesn't come from, and there's not a stat for that. And it's like, you can't count that. You have to just kind of look at him and see, and that's where the scouting comes into play and things like that. And it's like baseball has lost that a little bit. So Robles, in my mind, is your kind of meat and potatoes guy. So he might be the potatoes that you've been waiting for.
And it's double with Robles too, because it's a great point too about his ability on the bag to put pressure on pitchers and how that makes life easier for guys like Julio. But it's also just the thing of like, man, we've had to watch a couple seasons of Julio hitting beautiful home runs with nobody on base in front of him, and just like, oof, just the hurt in your chest you feel every time. He probably hits 2.5 home runs with nobody on base for every 1 home run he hits with somebody on base. It's like, it fucking hurts, man. And yeah, just the idea of like Robles acting as just a force multiplier on Julio's ability. That's why it's not just about an individual person's individual impact. It's like, no, Robles being in front of Julio really increases Julio's impact on the game, even if Julio's doing the exact same things. But just, it matters more when there are guys on base before you get that beautiful double down the line, or before you pound that home run out of the park. It's like I think he's incredibly valuable. Leadoff guys are very important. I like Victor a lot.
Yeah. To bounce back to the Randy, it's like JP is going to, we're thinking that he's going to have a better season, a bounce back season, and he's going to be hitting 9. And it's like having JP and Robles back to back, and then following that up with Julio and Randy. It's like there's a little bit of danger there in that Mariners lineup that people have just kind of been glossing over because the numbers and the OPS stuff isn't there. And it's like, this team isn't built to do that. That's why they've designed it in a different way. And, they've gone back to Edgar and kind of his hitting philosophy. It's like these changes are good for this team. We don't have to have, and I'm not going to say we shouldn't have signed Juan Soto, but we don't have to have Juan Soto or Pete Alonso to make this team good. You just have to play to your strengths and play around how your team performs. And I think they've done a decent job of that in terms of assembling this roster. Anyways, we got a little in the weeds there, but
I do agree.
All right, let's jump to. We're going to talk about all 3 of the main relievers before we bounce back to the one last hitter. So let's talk Andres Munoz. His number for saves right now is 26. How do we feel about that? Are the Mariners going to play at least 26 close games where Andres Munoz is going to close it out?
Yeah, I just think Munoz is a stud, one of the best. And I do think this Mariners team, as excited as I am for their more on-base style of offense, their Edgar Martinez style of offense this year, and I do think it'll be a step up from last year, they're going to play in close games. They're going to play in a lot of one-run games just with the way this team is built. And yeah, Munoz is the guy. And when he comes in, he gets the save. So give me over on saves.
Yep, I'm in agreement there. Not going to talk too much about that. Matt Brash, innings pitched. He's sitting at 50. Do you think he's going to make a big return? He's coming off that Tommy John surgery last year. He's a guy that we've only seen pitch once so far in this spring training and really has to ramp up before he can get going. So I don't think we'll see him for at least the first 2 weeks probably. Maybe it'll take a week and he can get back into the field. But Matt Brash, 50 innings pitched. What do you think? Keeping in mind the average reliever, like Trent Thornton, he's throwing like 60. Andres Munoz throwing 60-ish.
Yeah, 100%. I do think I'm going to take the under just because coming off Tommy John's, I think there'll be kids' gloves early. And then hypothetically, between Santos and him and Munoz, there should be enough talent that where he's not critical during every save. I just think, I think 45 might be more realistic of an expectation for him. This is also me just being I'm emotionally hedging with both him and Santos. I was hurt last year, and I don't want to be hurt again. So if he gets over 50, I'll be very excited. But I'm not planning on seeing him out there for 50 innings. Yeah,
I'm in agreement. Wow, another agreement. But my reasoning is look at him just basking in the sunlight. He's glorious over there.
This is what it feels like to get agreed with everything you say.
Brash is going to be our get out of a jams guy. We're going to have bases loaded, 2 outs, and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is going to be coming up for the Toronto Blue Jays. And it's hey, we need to get this guy struck out. We don't want to have this guy put the ball in play at all. That's going to be Matt Brash's job. He's going to come in and get 1 out. And that counts as 0.1 innings. That doesn't count as an inning. That counts as 0.1 innings. And he's going to have a lot more of those, in my mind, than he's going to have 1.2 inning sequences. It's they're going to let this guy relax. He's going to come in for a batter or two when he needs to. And in my mind, that's why he's going to go under.
And he's really good in that role, too. So, yeah, I think that it just might be a perfect marriage of team need plus what's probably good for the player. Once again, if he throws 70, I'll be pumped, but I wouldn't count on it.
Yep. All right, you mentioned him a little while ago, Gregory Santos, 3.31 walks per 9 innings. So, like we were talking about with George Kirby was sitting at 1.38. Do we think Santos is going to have about 2.5 times the amount of walks that George Kirby's going to have in terms of per 9? Is he going to be that wild?
I am actually going to go over on this. And it's no disrespect to Santos. I just think the way he plays. Once again, I don't know what his numbers were his first couple years with the White Sox, but I do just think he's the type of pitcher. He is certainly more of a Luis Castillo type than a George Kirby type in terms of control, and even to the nth degree, almost more of an Aroldis Chapman type of just. He throws the ball really, really hard, and he loves painting corners, and that generates a lot of walks. I think when Santos is on, he is great, one of the best. But I do think he can get a little wild. And I just think when you're a reliever, all of these numbers get inflated.
Yeah.
Because you don't have the same amount of time to let, statistics kind of work themselves out. If you give up 1 walk in, 1 inning of work, you're 9 walks per 9 innings. Yeah, exactly. So do I see him giving up 1 walk every 3 innings he comes in to try to get a save? Yeah, I do.
Yep. I agree. I think if he's gonna walk 1 guy over 1 guy every 3 innings feels like about right. Maybe even a little bit more. He's a guy who definitely has had his wild nights. And struggled last year, I think. So I agree. I'm going to take the over on that one.
Yeah, he's also coming off a really injury-riddled year. Obviously, not as injured as Brash last year, but he dealt with some serious injury stuff. And I could just see him taking some time to hit his stride this season. I'm optimistic that he will hit his stride. But even if his stride is 1 walk every 3 innings, while he ramps up, he might be giving 1 walk every 2 innings. And then, halfway into the season, it's impossible to climb over that mountain. So, yeah.
Yep. All right. Our last hitter, the last thing that we have to do for this 1.5 hour long pod.
Get me out of here.
Is Luke Raley. We're finally going to talk about WRC+, John's favorite thing. Luke Raley is projected to have a WRC+ of 112 this season. WRC+, for those of you that are like John and don't necessarily remember exactly what it means, it is weighted runs created. It's basically like how good are you compared to the average player in baseball. It's not like in terms of your position. It's the average player. 100 is average. Do we think Luke Raley is going to be 12% better than the average hitter in Major League Baseball?
12% better than the average hitter in baseball. Average player in baseball.
Do you want me to go first? Let me give it to you.
Yeah, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Luke Raley will be better. We're going to take the over here purely because he's going to be platooned. He's going to get the opportunity to go against right-handed pitchers and not have to worry about being overexposed like we saw last year. He's going to be better than last year in terms of WRC plus. He might not play more, but he's going to have better opportunities and better performances because of that. So I'm going to take the over on the WRC plus. Because it doesn't matter how much he plays. It's compared to his production in that time. So I think his production is going to be better than it was last year because his opportunities are going to be better.
Well, I dig your optimism, man. I think Rayleigh's a WRC plus of 1.05. You know, I just think that's who he is. And yeah, good opportunities can lead to good outcomes. But I do even think, we've talked about it before. Anybody below the top, 5 hitters on our team, they're probably all hitting above where they should. So that makes me nervous.
Yeah, that's very fair. All right, man. That's it. We did it. We made it through the hour and 40-minute long slog of a podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed. Anything to say, John, before I sign us off here?
I'm exhausted.
Yeah, that took a lot out of me. I got to go eat some food. It's 8:15.
Oh, yeah. I'm glad we got this done. A lot of good basketball coming up. I'm very excited for opening day.
Yeah.
We're hitting a good stretch in sports.
This is our prime. We had the doldrums the last couple weeks, man.
Yeah. We won't have the doldrums again until summer, so we're in good shape.
All right. Well, for John Carey, I'm Tyler Cartwright. This has been the Sound Up Seattle podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to subscribe, drop a like, do all that good stuff. Comment, tell us about why you think we have worse opinions than everybody else talking about the Mariners. You can find us on YouTube if you're listening on Spotify at Sound Up Seattle. And those of you who are just tuning into the pod, obviously you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. So we appreciate you guys listening. Drop those ratings. Give us 5 stars if you would. I know we're an hour and 40 minutes into this pod, and I'm telling you to do that now. So I know you're going to do it.
If you don't do it now,
when's the next opportunity? You can find Sound Up Seattle on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, all at Sound Up Seattle, all lowercase, all one word. You can email us your questions, comments, or concerns at soundupseattle@gmail.com. You can find me, Tyler, at TyCart50, everywhere that's important. And you can find John
playing Call of Duty World at War, the
Wow.
original. That game slaps. Graphics are still great. Guns are still great. So much more violent than it needs to be. Just a fantastic game.
Love it. All right. And with all that being said, let's go Nerds, baby.
Go Nerds. First of the year. Go Nerds.
Yes, sir.
Love it.